Look, to me, the whole question about racism has never been discussed deeply. I grew up, and to me, this is very personal on many levels because I grew up in an India which had the caste system, which is basically racism. Okay, you had the hierarchy. We were considered untouchables. We were kept in a little box. You came from this family who should just do this job for the rest of your life. Okay, and it had economic basis to it. You have to understand that racism has an economic basis. You tell all the poor whites they're poor, they're rednecks, they're Ku Klux Klansmen, you lower their cost of labor, okay? That's what it's about. You tell women they're less than men, you keep their labor costs low, okay? So if you take a factory room of 1,000 people, let's say 50 are men, 50 are women, okay? And 500 are women, 500 are men, and 500 are black and 500 are white. You pay the blacks a little bit less than the whites. You pay the women a little bit less than the men, and they're all squabbling among each other, okay? So we got to step back and stop being stupid. People need to understand racism and this kind of division is sown to keep us fighting from the real fact of what's actually going on, that you have a set of people, the lawyers and the lobbyists, who don't produce anything. They're parasites. Look at the stock market. In the midst of all this protest, it's going up. It doesn't make any sense. It's a fake economy. So you have the real economy of people busting their butts and actually creating stuff, actually working hard, trying to innovate, small businesses, being creative, right? And then you have this other economy which is running on nothing. It's a fake economy. So we have to understand that when you look at the concept of keeping people in little boxes, that's what the caste system did, and said you could not do this. I experienced that, being given water. People talk about segregation. I experienced as a child being given water in a different bowl because I was not of this caste. Okay? So when I came to the United States in 1970, I heard about, wow. I said, I remember that happening to me when I was in India. Okay? So what was this? And in India, by the way, the caste system, you had all these people trying to help the lower caste, but they were all sellouts. They basically take advantage of oppression. They never go at the problem. And that's what occurred in 1960 in this country. People are starting to come up bottoms up. And by the way, poor whites too. Poor whites and poor blacks. They're coming bottoms up, and they said this is not right. And there was a true movement building bottoms up. Well, in response to that, people like the Kennedys went and found this guy Martin Luther King because they wanted to control the movement. They organized the March on Washington. Beautiful speech. I have a dream, blah, blah, blah. Okay? But what did they deliver? They said, don't use the N-word. And they threw something like affirmative action, which basically pitted blacks against whites. What was really needed was infrastructure. Infrastructure in the inner cities, and you still don't have it. In fact, Massachusetts has an F minus in infrastructure. And in fact, if you look at the per capita income, blacks and Hispanics make very low income, and whites over the last 20 years, their incomes are actually coming down, cut in half. They want to put everyone on a plantation and a reservation, okay, all of us, okay? And they want to boost up a fake economy, destroy real economies, and have everyone pigeonholed. But the bottom line is this. The civil rights movement of the 1960s was taken over by the not-so-obvious establishment, the Kennedy-type people, who pushed people like, against people like me, the people we talked about, elevated them, and they squashed the real foundations of those movements, which is to deliver infrastructure. Instead, what they did was they did things that sounded good. Oh, don't use the N-word. Okay, you're now not a racist. Don't, give affirmative action. Meanwhile, so you created some Obamas and you created some Oprah Winfreys and you created that strata of people. And those strata of people, frankly, perpetuated the issue because they made some money. Look at what Obama did in 2008. He gave the banks the biggest bailouts. Meanwhile, where he came from, Chicago, I think it has one of the highest crime rates. Black on black violence. He didn't do anything for his people. If anything, he helped the big bankers, black and white, That's what he did. And now he's talking about, quote unquote, systemic racism and police reform. When he was in power, what did he do? What were his actions? He bailed out the big banks. That's what he did. That's what he should talk about. So what these guys do is they're no different than the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? They talk about big game, but they never do what is necessary for their own people. And this happens also among black and white politicians, right? The white politicians will go to some poor neighborhood and the white people say, those people are this, and the black politicians do the same. They use race for their advancement. That's racism. When Elizabeth Warren, when these politicians say, when Joe Kennedy here takes pictures with homeless black people so he can have nice Facebook pictures, that's racism. So to me, racism is using race for your political or your economic advancement or using it to separate people. In India, one politician will go to a Hindu neighborhood and say stuff against the Christians, or go to a Christian neighborhood and say, you see, that's what these guys do. They separate people. They don't care to solve racism. They don't care about any of these people. So in my view, what's going on, is what you're actually seeing is the reason these protests are taking place. First, there's confusion, and the problems have not been solved. The fundamental issue has not been solved. And that fundamental issue is infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure.